Okay, I want to welcome everybody to the September 2025 edition of the McKinney Amateur Radio Club. Glad you're all here. Check-in code tonight, if you got an email through Ham Club Online, is Echo Kilo, EK for short. I don't make the codes, it's random. Okay, so make sure you check in tonight. If you did not get an email for whatever reason, or you're not a club member, check in. I think, Lance, you have a tablet. Sign in.
Yeah, we'll get it turned on here in a minute.
All right. Sorry, I've got a little frog in my voice tonight, so it's... Ew. Not that kind of frog. Thanks, Jerry. I know, yeah. Were you on the net last night? We only had one relay last night. That was easy. Okay, again, check-in code EK. All right, Zoom meeting protocols. If you are on Zoom, like my wife is on Zoom tonight, let's see, you just, please mute yourself if you haven't already. Hold off on any questions until the presenter asks for input tonight. And the voting procedure has not changed in a very long time. Check-in counts as a vote of yes, unless you tell us otherwise. So you do not need to vote yes verbally. All right, please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, many of you may have heard on the Sunday Night Net that Janice McKinley passed away. This was Dan McKinley's wife, W5FRT. Very sad to see that. Dan passed away, what was it, January 2nd or 3rd this year? I think it was January 3rd that Dan passed away. So please keep that family in your prayers, because they've gone through a lot this year. We do have a bylaw amendment motion that's coming up, and to talk more about that, I'm going to turn it over to David Pekarsky.
All right, I know everybody here has studied our Constitution and bylaws very closely, so you're going to be well versed in what we're going to talk about here. But that being said, one of the things, Ron holds the position of communications director, and communications director for us isn't what most people would think. He's not in charge of doing all the flyers and all of these other things. He's the guy in charge of ensuring that each and every piece of equipment that the club owns is maintained, operates properly, and is configured the way that we want it to be configured. Now, when it comes time to start talking about is everything working according to the FCC regulations, that's the trustee's job, and so that's me. So my job is not that hard. Ron's is, and it continues to grow. I got a few notes here, but basically, the communications director within the bylaws is authorized to officially appoint 2 assistants. As we have been growing our infrastructure here within the McKinney Amateur Radio Club, 2 is starting to feel pretty small. Because when the Constitution and bylaws were written, we had 1 2-meter repeater at 75 and 380. Today, we've got a 2-meter repeater at 75 and 380. We have a 70-centimeter repeater in Melissa. We have another 2-meter repeater over at Custer in Virginia. We're working on a second 70-centimeter repeater in Fairview. Oh, and guess what? We have an APRS digipeater in Melissa. We've got an APRS digipeater in New Hope. We're working on another APRS digipeater in Fairview. Basically, by the time we're done with all of our current projects, we're going to have 5 different sites with multiple pieces of infrastructure installed. Half of these will be networked together in some way. Well, functionality-wise is what I'm talking about. Yeah, we'll be using microwave for the networking, but the functionality will be to network these things. And basically what we're going to wind up with, or what we've got now, is probably 10 to 12 times the amount of infrastructure that our current Constitution and bylaws actually envisioned when they were written. So I'm making a motion that we amend the bylaws. This is the text of the bylaws as they exist today. What is it? I think it's under Section 10, Paragraph 3 is where we talk about the assistance for the communications director. And it says that the communications director can request 2. I'm making a motion that we strike the number 2 and leave the rest of it as is. This way he can have as many assistants as he needs to take care of analog repeaters, digital repeaters, digipeaters, DMR, because the Fairview repeater will have DMR, APRS, microwaves, etc. We need more subject matter experts to help Ron with this. So that's my motion. All right, even though I'm not the president, I'll say Dave Powers, KS5SK, was the first one to second that. The way that the procedure within the Constitution is worded for us to be able to amend the bylaws, it's great that we've got a motion and we have a second. Now what we have to do is table this. It has to be published in the newsletter, and then we can bring it back from the table next month and vote on it. We can do discussions right now. The concern was back then is there was a lot of, and it's still a concern now, there's a lot of interfacing with the city government. And we want to be able to control the number of people that are doing that. That's one reason. Second reason is that we had a phone patch that was only available to people who paid to be able to have phone patch use. Well, you didn't, if you had 10 assistants, they would all know that phone patch code, whether or not they paid for it. So there was a concern that there'd be people trying to become an assistant just to shirk their financial obligations. Ron, how many hours, I'm sorry, the question for those on Zoom is how many hours is everybody spending today? Ron, how many hours do you spend?
I probably spend anywhere from 10 to 15 hours a week.
A week? I personally spend about 8 to 10 hours a week on these things. Did you ever appoint a second one?
You mean an assistant?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that Lewis?
Yeah, I had Lewis on CAD.
Right.
And, Lance for Mueller and electrical.
Yeah, part of what we're running into now, even if it's not huge amounts of effort, it's a really broad set of technology skills that we're looking for, and we want people who are reasonably expert in those different subject matter areas, and to expect a single person or even 2 or 3 people to know everything that needs to be known about all of the different pieces of subject matter that are now involved in our infrastructure, I personally don't believe is reasonable. We had that discussion at the board meeting when we were bringing this up, and the question for those on Zoom is, hey, is there any reason why we decided to just remove the cap rather than just increasing it? we wanted to make it so that this could not need to be amended again. Because today it's fairly, it's going to get fairly complex as we work through these projects, and in 10 years it may likely be even more complex, and if we've guessed wrong at how many subject matter experts we need, we'd have to come amend it again. Now what we do, the big thing that we talked about is, if you read this, there is a bit of a control here, in that Ron can't just appoint people willy-nilly. It has to be reviewed by a nominating committee. And the nominating committee, for right now anyway, has been appointed to be me and Sid. In the future, it can be other people, but basically the reason why you have the nominating committee thing is to make sure that there's multiple sets of eyes on the people that are being appointed, to make sure that they truly are qualified and it's not just someone who talks a good game. The term, there's no defined term in the bylaws, so I found that terminology interesting, but not exactly relevant. Yes, Mike.
Being in field days constantly on my mind, under what you said with the Go Kits and the computers and things that the four field day follow under purview?
They all do today. Basically every piece of equipment, all the stuff that's stored at my place, all the stuff that's stored at Ron's place, anything that's stored anywhere, if it's owned by the McKinney Amateur Radio Club, Ron's accountable for it.
I haven't looked at those laptops in years.
They're in my bag.
Better yours than mine.
All right, so if I'm remembering my Robert's rules,
Not my rules.
I believe now we need to have a motion to table this, which I am happy to make a motion to table this motion until the October meeting. Seconded by Ron, WW2CBI, Mr. Secretary. Any discussion on the tabling? You're the only one that can call a vote.
All right. Again, do we need a vote on both at this time? Just on the tabling?
And then when we bring it back next month, we'll vote again.
All right. All in favor to table this until the next meeting? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, it is
So the text
tabled.
of this will be in the newsletter.
All right, very good. Good evening, everyone. Sorry about the technical difficulties. My name is Paul English. I'm a Department of Army civilian. I work for the U.S. Army Network Enterprise Technology Command, where I serve as the Chief of Army Military Auxiliary Radio System, and I also do land mobile radio public service communications for the Army, modernizing those systems. Appreciate the invite tonight to talk to you briefly about the MARS program, who we are, what we do, etc. I was told that I have about 2 hours. Is that still the case?
You're welcome to talk for 2 hours.
Okay. Well, let's get rolling then. First thing I want to do is just set some ground rules. These are the authorities that all of our MARS volunteers operate under. You know, a lot of DoD instructions, directives, Army regulations, etc. The bottom line is the MARS program mission is to provide contingency HF support to the Department of Defense and the services. And as we're going through this presentation, we will neck that down to show you exactly what that means. We primarily use high-frequency radio only. We do have a handful of VHF repeaters that are sprinkled about the country in high population areas where we have a lot of MARS members who are able to talk across VHF repeaters. But really, we only have probably about 8 of those in various locations across the U.S. So primarily, we are interested in HF capability, long-haul regional HF capability. This slide shows how we fit into the overall structure. Down in the lower right-hand corner, you see my mugshot suitable for posting in most post offices across the country. I am, again, the Chief of Army Mars. I have an Air Force Mars counterpart, Dave Antry. There are only 2 Mars services remaining. And it's been 10 years ago, right about this time, September-October timeframe, when Navy Marine Corps Mars made the decision to close down their Mars program. Can I get a show of hands? I see a little picture of everybody. Is anybody a current Mars member or former Mars member sitting there in the restaurant? Anybody?
No, sir.
Yeah, I don't see any hands going up. Okay, no biggie. So again, I work for Network Enterprise Technology Command. I am based out of Fort Hood, Texas, and my headquarters that I work for is out at Fort Huachuca, Arizona. And this just shows how we fit into the overall DoD structure, where we get our assigned missions, who we fall under, who we report to, that sort of thing. On the Air Force side, they have a similar structure that shows just where they fall into the overall chain of command. So the Mars programs are made up between Army and Air Force. We both have between 400 and 500 active members. So between the both of us, anywhere from 800 to 1,000 members at any given time. Those numbers fluctuate month to month. A Mars member is a civilian volunteer, amateur radio operator, any class license. Doesn't have to be prior service, no military expertise required, but someone who is interested in supporting the Department of Defense and the services. So that's who our members, that's where they come from. And we do that because one of our primary missions is to interface into the amateur radio community. So the best way to do that is to come from the amateur radio community, because you'll know all the ins and outs. Hopefully you will have maintained your local contacts in the amateur radio community. This slide shows how all of this fits together. There are primarily 3 amateur radio related organizations that support various entities. And from right to left, you can see DoD under Mars. We operate on National Telecommunications Information Administration or agency, I forget what the A stands for. So even though our members are amateur radio operators, when they are operating as a Mars member, they are actually falling up under NTIA spectrum authorities. In case you didn't know, there are 2 federal spectrum authorities that carve up the spectrum between federal government and then the civilian government. And under DoD, we fall under NTIA. So again, our members can have any amateur radio license, but our primary responsibilities are state, region, and national. When you look in the middle, Radio Amateur Civil Emergency Service, again, amateur radio folks who are affiliated with and registered with either a county or a state emergency management organization. It could be any amateur radio license, etc. And that's where you get more into VHF and UHF along with HF. So you start to see a mix of more spectrum usage there. Then on the amateur radio emergency services side, that is more closely aligned with ARRL, local community activities, etc. Not necessarily affiliated with a state, county emergency management agency. And again, on the ARRI side, they are wide open into the modes and frequencies that they're using, depending on what mission they're supporting. So from a DoD perspective, one of our primary roles is to interface with and liaise with not only ARRIs and RACIs, but also individual Mars members, because what we are looking for in support of DoD is local ground truth information. What's going on locally following a worst day type of scenario. This next slide, not trying to say that Mars is the center of the universe, but it was the easiest way I could depict the various tentacles that Mars reaches out into. One of our missions in the books is to support U.S. Northern Command and their component commands from all of the services. We also support training with the various services, Army, Air Force, Marines, Navy. We support them through on-air training. Sometimes we are able to do hands-on. National Guard may have a drill weekend, and we may be able to have members go to one of their drill weekends and do some hands-on HF training. And in fact, it was 2 weeks ago, I was up in your neck of the woods doing a weekend drill with one of the National Guard infantry units doing some HF work on their new PRC 160s. On the bottom, you see that we also reach out into the amateur radio community and Oxcom community. We have members who are licensed in, obviously amateur radio. We have GMRS licensed members. And we have folks who also, reach out into CB land and FRS. Not so much on that side, but more primarily with the amateur radio side. Again, show of hands, how many of you have heard of the DHS, Department of Homeland Security, shared HF resources? Any hands go up?
Yes, sir.
Can't really tell. Okay. So if any of you are affiliated or support your county or city emergency management, you have the opportunity to have those entities registered with the DHS Shares program and actually become a federal operator, a federal radio station under DHS Shares. If that's something that you think may be of interest to you or your organization, do a Google search for DHS Shares, or you can drop me a note and I can get you pointed in the right direction to get more information about DHS Shares. On almost all the slides, my contact info is typically down in the lower left-hand corner, and I will make sure that Tim gets a copy of these slides for publication, if any of you are interested in that. So those are sort of the linkages of what our Mars members do and the various organizations that we may reach out and provide support. Be that as a catcher's mitt, they want to do some over-the-air training, or they may have specific requests for information that we would be able to source through our various contacts, either through the Northcom components, through the Shares program, amateur radio, etc. Let me pause there. Are there any questions out in the chat room that we can take care of?
We do have one question. Just a second, please.
Hi. Yeah, hi, Paul. I raised my hand as the one having a interface with the Shares. I was part of the CIKR community. I was just curious, are you getting many of those agencies on Shares anymore? It kind of was real popular for a while, and then it fell off about the last 5-10 years.
Yeah, it is. It has come back. They were going through a reorganization a few months ago, and they had paused processing new applications. I think the reorganization is now done, and I think they are once again onboarding agencies that are interested in becoming part of the Shares program. Okay, any other questions? Okay, let's move on to the next. So our primary document that defines what the MARS program is called a DoD Instruction 4650.02. That is a joint staff publication. It basically says, hey, services, if you want to have a MARS program, here are the rules that you must follow. And those rules are basically laid out here. It's primarily an HF capability. You have to use FCC licensed amateur radio operators to be MARS volunteers. And then it lays out some of the missions: support to NORTHCOM, support to humanitarian disaster relief, provide backup HF comms, that sort of thing. On this slide, what it's saying is the DoD MARS community serves as the primary interface with the amateur radio community for all things DoD. Because of the unique perspective that our volunteers are also amateur radio operators, that makes us well primed to serve as that primary interface. Again, to try to get ground truth information following large scale types of events. On this slide, the big change is where the MARS programs got into trouble about 10, 12 years ago was we were in active competition with Aries and RACES. We were trying to put MARS stations in state and county EOCs. And that is honestly what caused the downfall of the Navy Marine Corps MARS program, because they were going after that as one of their primary missions. And, that was really a come to Jesus type of event for the Army and the Air Force that says, hey, we don't want to go down that same path. And so we proposed changes to the overall instruction that said, hey, MARS, you are a military auxiliary. You have no business in state, county, and local EOCs. That's where the amateur radio community, Aries, RACES, etc., belongs. You interface with those folks. And so, that freed up the DHS Shares program to now go after those entities to become part of the DHS Shares federal radio program. So that's how all of this sort of fit together. MARS backed out, Shares stepped right in. And so, state, county, local EOCs, you all are now authorized to apply for membership in DHS Shares. And then from the DoD instruction, of course, each service has to have our own regulation or instruction that provides policy guidance, et cetera, for how MARS members will act, what their training requirement is, basic membership standards. And so we each have our own regulations there. Our primary mission, and this is codified in Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff Order 2-TAC-23, which is a classified document. It's classified at the secret level. But on the unclassed side, here is our mission. My headquarters, U.S. Army Network Enterprise Technology Command, serves as the interface to the other MARS services, of which there's only Air Force, as well as serving as the interface to Radio Amateur Civil Emergency Service. And as this order was being written, we got clarification put in there that the term RACES is just a generic term for anyone operating as an amateur radio operator. Either you could be affiliated with RACES, you could be affiliated with Aries, or you could just be an individual amateur radio operator. That order specifies our requirements to support various types of information requests during worst day scenarios. Think of large scale, larger than state, larger than multiple states, something on a larger scale where DoD actually would become the lead federal agency as opposed to DHS. That's where our mission comes into play. And so what we do required on a quarterly basis is to run DoD HF COMEXs where we practice going after that type of information. And you can see at the bottom of the slide some of the questions that we ask for as far as, what's the local conditions, what's the road conditions, bridge condition, fuel power, et cetera. That's what we do on an annual basis, 4 times a year. And this is what our annual HF exercise schedule, how it appears. We'll run those 4-1, 2, 3, 4 exercises. We also sponsor QRPX low power competitions. We assist in running the Armed Forces Day crossband test. We run an HF skills challenge for military units who want to hone and refine their operator HF skills. And then we also facilitate getting folks registered. Every October, there is an international HF competition called Double Skywave. That's a Canadian sponsored event. Last year, there were about 17 different countries that competed in that event. Let me pause there for questions. Questions or comments from anyone?
No questions at this time.
Okay. Next thing I want to delve into, this is part of a presentation that I gave at the May Hamvention in Dayton, well, actually Greene County. We have started moving into what's called the Team Awareness Kit. Team Awareness Kit is an Army-produced common operational picture platform that is now widely accepted and used on the civilian side. Here in the state of Texas, they have fully embraced the use of TAC. They have a whole section down in Austin that runs the TAC server. They have a whole set of standards for any first responders who want to be on TAC. They will sponsor them. They will provide the servers, et cetera. And, again, it's basically a common operational picture that you can use for mission planning, figuring out where the bad guys are, where you need to stage, what areas have been searched, that sort of thing. There are 3 flavors. There's iPhone, Android, and Windows TAC. Because there's 3 flavors, that makes interfacing with the various flavors of TAC a little bit interesting. Some will do some features, others won't do the same features. So I guess it's just a product of where we are with the various platforms that are out there. So on the MARC side, what we are looking to do is stop primarily relying on wireless data, LTE data, to send these map markers. And what we are developing is an HF only capability where you could have a standalone HF station that's in that worst day scenario, no telephone, no internet, no space connections, your HughesNet and your Starlink no longer works. Using HF going to a TAC server, you could still drop those points, those point droppers. Where are the roads damaged? Where are the bridges out? Here are the gas stations that are operational. Here are the grocery stores that are operational, that sort of thing. You could, via HF, populate that to a TAC server gateway that would then get published to the rest of the community, to those supported headquarters who more than likely will have some sort of connectivity going. And so that's what we are really working with right now, is to try to develop this HF only capability. If you squint, I guess, in the bottom, the map, this was from one of our recent exercises where wherever you see an orange circle, or a colored circle rather, those were MARC stations that were on the air. And for this exercise, they were asked to point out fuel stations that were open, and I believe hospitals, the closest hospital to them. Now, again, this was all done via internet because we're still working on the HF only. But again, common operational picture that has a lot of relevance, widely used in FirstNet circles. If your emergency managers are not up on TAC, you may want to do a little bit of research. Just do a Google for Team Awareness Kit, and all types of information will come up, and they can apply to be sponsored by TDEM and run on the TDEM servers for their common operational picture. They're supporting the area, the county, the city, et cetera. This year, Mars turns 100 years old in November. And as I was doing some research, going back through some old QST articles and some other archives, I stumbled on this QST article from November 1937, where the chief of signal used to do a broadcast, a CW broadcast every November for Armistice Day. And so, of course, the light went off, and I said, hey, wouldn't it be cool for our 100th anniversary to dust off the old CW gear and let's do some broadcasts from my boss, Major General McPhail, and as well as the current Chief of Signal, Colonel Gordon. And so that's the plan. On 10, 12, and 13 November, we're still working out the times, we're going to have a series of stations that are running the current mil-spec HF gear, PRC 150s, PRC 160s. They're going to be running CW broadcasts at various times, various frequencies. Now you're probably asking yourself, how are you going to do that? And I have some folks who are working on an Arduino keyer that is going to interface on the mic jack to the 150s and 160s. The intent is to send those pre-formatted messages from the Major General and the Colonel in two separate speeds. Right now we're looking at 10 and 15 words per minute. The messages will all be pre-formatted, preloaded into the Arduino, and when it's a station's turn, on time and frequency, they hit message 1 and it starts blasting that CW message, pushing for either 150 or 400 watt stations across the US to broadcast these messages. There will be a link that if you successfully receive the broadcast, you could request a 100th anniversary Mars QSL card. So really excited about that. Yeah, I think it's pretty neat that we're using, the current HF technology to do something that was done 100 years ago, using CW that was, first developed back in the mid 1800s. So I just think that's kind of cool and kind of completes the circle in celebration of our 100th anniversary. So again, I appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate the invitation to come talk to you briefly. I've got more information that we will be publishing about the Mars 100. I'm trying to nail down the exact frequencies and times that each of the stations is going to broadcast, so that you have a better chance, a more assured chance of hearing at least one of those broadcasts, so that you can then log on and request the Mars 100th anniversary QSO card. With that, I will take any questions you have.
Okay, we have a question. Just a second. Yeah, come on up.
Thank you. All right, so I picked up the Asus 710 and I ordered it with the Mars modification. So what would I do if I wanted to get involved in this aspect of ham radio now that I have Mars capable radio?
So take down my phone number or email address, shoot me an email, shoot me a text. I will get you linked up with our region director here in this area. I'll get you linked up with our membership administrator, Jules, out at Fort Huachuca, and we'll have some folks talk to you, just talk a little bit more about the program. I will send you the documents, the overarching documents, the AR, Army Regulation 25-6. We also have a Mars Manual 1 that goes into a little bit more detail about who we are, what we do. And then if that still interests you, we will send you the application and get that processing.
Any other questions? Come on up. We have another question.
Yes, Paul. You mentioned you touched on encryption on use of TAC to relay to on MARS frequencies. Could you expand a little bit? We're all familiar with the limitations of encryption. Is that something that's going to be in widespread use or only on the TAC duty, or exactly how does encryption fit into your picture?
Yeah, so on the MARS side, remember that you're no longer operating under your FCC authorities. You're operating under an NTIA authority, and therefore you are authorized to use encryption. Now, the encryption that we use is an AES 256. So it's not NSA Type 1 encryption, it's a commercial AES 256. And we do that just to keep Joe Amateur Radio, Joe Shortwave Listener monitoring our frequencies and seeing what we're doing. So we provide cover over the traffic, because as you start congregating this information, that pool of information becomes more and more sensitive, because it would give the bad guys indications and warnings about what's happening, where limitations are. And so that's why all of the digital messages that we send are online encrypted. We have that built-in encryptor that's set every time you transmit. It's being encrypted with that AES 256 key.
Thank you. Oh, we have a follow-up question. Just a second.
Paul, in working national disasters, we quite often, I work with the Red Cross, and we're quite often deployed with the National Guard. And you mentioned the restrictions now in place between MARS and the EOCs at their various headquarters and the disaster centers. How do we see in the field that we're hand in hand with the National Guard and the State Guard, delivering food and supplies. How is that managed if it's not managed at the EOC, how do you see MARS involved with that?
So those types of operations are more localized, regionalized. We have not been called out on any of those types of operations. Where we were called out was, I'm trying to think, the last hurricane that went into Haiti, Puerto Rico. We were activated. We were in direct support of military and government stations, as well as Navy ships that were deploying down to set up floating command posts in preparation for response. I can't remember the name of that operation. Prior to that, the Haiti earthquake in 2010, we actually had MARS members who were on the island following that disaster, who were providing comms back stateside. Prior to that, we had MARS members who were activated. One of the big major snowstorms in the Northeast, where a lot of comms were knocked out, we had folks who actually set up in one of the AT&T buildings and was liaising out of there. So not a lot of call out. Again, when you look at the definition of the primary order that we operate under, that Chairman's Order 2 TAC 23, there you're talking major big-time disasters. On the Northcom side, it's going to be some of the smaller stuff. For example, some of the information that we collect, road closures, bridge damage, etc., is what Northcom and the Army and Marine components would be interested in if they're trying to get big transports in with relief supplies. And so that's how all that sort of fits together. You're not going to see MARS called out, especially if comm systems are still reliable, etc. That's where the amateur radio community, areas, races, and individuals really come to bear and provide that support. Look at the floods that happened several weeks ago down in South Texas with all of the summer camps. Huge amateur radio presence there because it was more localized, and so that's why you're not seeing more of the national level assets that are called in to support that. Over.
questions?
All right, thank you, Paul. I certainly do appreciate that. Great presentation. And I don't know about you guys, I'm going after that QSL card in November. Okay, yeah, we need a motion to adjourn. Dave has motion to adjourn. Ron, you second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Anybody want to stay longer? No? Somebody does? No. Okay.